PalWorld is sweeping the planet, and for good reason. This game is freaking amazing. So I'm going to give you guys some helpful tips to hopefully help prevent you having to redo some of your early game stuff in the mid game. As you start to follow the tutorial in the beginning of the game, it's going to ask you to create a PalBox showcased here in front of me. Now this PalBox is very important. This PalBox determines where you can build all of your structures. There's basically a sphere of influence around this, and that contains everywhere you can build. Now, the current state of the game, the AI really struggles with elevation, either increases or decreases in elevation. As you can see here, I picked a location that was packed with elevation, and it has made it very, very difficult to build. Not only that, pals struggle getting up and down different elevations to get to crafting benches or things of that nature. Probably the worst part of all, your box, if it's too close to a mountainside or too close to a cliff, as pals come out of the box, as you place them in your base to actually go do work, they will sometimes just fall off the cliff or spawn inside the mountain. So it's extremely important that you find a large flat area to put down your PalBox in the beginning, and I highly recommend putting it in the center of your base. Remember, it needs to be as flat and as large as possible. Tip number 2, you're going to recognize very, very quickly that at nighttime temperatures drop and your character starts to suffer. While your character is cold, you quickly drop health. So it's important to manage this as efficiently as possible. There's a couple of ways to do this. One, you can build a campfire. Standing next to a campfire will increase the temperature of your character, although that's very limiting because you really can't move very far away from it. Option number 2 is creating a torch. Having a torch with your character will also increase the temperature. But third, and the best option, is creating clothes. There are several different types of clothes you can create, but the earliest one is the cloth outfit, and I highly recommend rushing this. This will pretty much nullify all of your cold temperature problems in the early game. All it takes is cloth, and to make cloth you need wool, which you can get from all of the little lamb pals that are all over the beginning area. Tip number 3, and this one may seem obvious, but I was very much in the Pokemon mindset where I was like, okay, I want to try to capture one of everything. You need to capture a ton of pals. Not to spoil stuff in the mid game, but having more than one pal will become very important. And not only that, but every pal you catch has random passive skills. So for example, you can see that this Fox Sparks has none. And if we go to a different one, Nightwing, for example, has one called Cold Blooded. These are random and they can be insanely powerful. For example, this perk, Lucky, it is showcased by a yellow highlight, basically meaning that it's very powerful. You can see that it increases work speed and attack both by 15%. So capturing a lot of pals, you're increasing the pool for where you can get better passive skills, and it will become more important later on down the road. Tip number 4, fairly early in the game, you will run into a technology tree point called Common Shield. Now, my mindset was stuck in Arc, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a little wooden shield that you have to hold up and block things. It doesn't sound that fun. I'm going to avoid it. Well, this is actually not a shield you hold up in front of you. It is a passive armor shield that basically just gives you additional HP that regenerates itself. So extremely important. Make the shield as soon as you can. I did not make this until like level 15 and regretted it immediately. Tip number 5, and this one is a little bit more complicated, but it's fairly simple to get your base to be self-sustaining. And now, what do I mean by that? Your pals get hungry while they're working. If you do not feed them, they will start to become injured, they will stop working around the base, and it's a big problem. So, a couple of things you need. The tutorial will guide you in this direction, but you need to make sure that you create a berry plantation. In addition to the berry plantation, you need to have a feed box. Once you have those two things up and running, your pals will actually seed and water the feed box and carry those berries to your feed box. And then they will come over here and help themselves whenever they're hungry. And here's a perfect example of Fuak getting hungry. He's coming over and eating berries and making sure that his food is topped off. This is extremely important so you don't have to sit here and manually feed everyone. I highly recommend getting this up and running as soon as possible. So as you're getting your base up and running and you're getting more pals working on things, it is extremely important that you know how to make them work on things that are important. So, for example, this guy is particularly good at chopping wood. Right now, he is not chopping. So you can walk up to any pal at any point in time and press F to basically pick them up. You then can walk them over to the thing you want them to be doing and press F again, and this basically assigns them to it. Now, currently he's not working because he's cooling off, but this is basically how you assign them to specific things. So not only will your pals that are assigned to your base do this, but also the pals you have equipped will do this. And let me showcase this because I only discovered this recently and it's actually very, very valuable. But the pals you have in your party, if you hold down E, you basically aim where you're going to throw these things. And if you throw it, for example, at a tree, your pal will start logging regardless of where you are. So if you're out in the world and you're chopping trees and you want to increase the efficiency, you can have your pal chop alongside you. Tip number 7, you can fast travel from your base. Now, it's a little embarrassing to admit how long it took me to understand this, but as you progress throughout the map, you will find these fast travel points. They will be all over the place and they're extremely helpful from getting point A to point B. For the first about 20 hours of gameplay, I thought that I had to run to a tower to be able to fast travel to the other towers. But from your PalBox, you can actually walk up to it, press C, and then fast travel to any one of these points. Don't be like me, save yourself some time and fast travel from the PalBox. Tip number 8, pals currently cannot open doors. So for example, you see this Pengullet here and he's cooling this little freezer. If my door was shut, he could not get to this and would not do this activity. So I see a lot of people building these very large bases and then putting all of their benches inside, and then their pals actually cannot transition from inside to outside. So you either have to leave your door open at all times, which I think ruins the immersion a little bit, or build most of your stuff outside like I'm currently doing here. Tip number 9, both you and your pals are going to be constantly getting hungry. And this actually has a pretty big effect on things. It will reduce the damage and the HP and your defense, both to you and your pals. If your hunger reaches 0, your HP declines rapidly. Same situation from your pals. So my advice, as you're running around in the world, I'm always picking up berries from berry bushes. This works pretty well to get your hunger back in place. As you get more mid-game, the hunger requirements of the pals gets larger. So you can start cooking at that point to carry less berries around on you, but highly recommend picking berries as you're exploring the world. Tip number 10, this one is a little bit more nuanced. Try to build your PalBox with a ore node in the sphere of influence. Now this is a little strange. You can always just walk out and hit it yourself, but if the ore node is actually inside your sphere of influence, your pals will also mine ore for you. The transition from early game to middle game ore becomes increasingly important. You need iron ingots for almost anything. I wish I had done this because I've had to manually go out and hit all these iron nodes myself. So not necessary, but if you want to give yourself a little bit more convenience, try to get an iron node within your sphere of influence. Tip number 11. This one also seems pretty straightforward, but follow the tutorial. The tutorial does a really good job of forcing you to build things that you might not build just because of the way it sounds, but actually have a lot of value. If you're getting bored of following the tutorial or you hit a part that you really just can't progress in, come over to your PalBox, and if you hit V, it says base upgrade. This will also walk you through another sort of mini tutorial that increases the number of pals you can have working at your base, as well as the max number of bases that you can have over long periods of time. Okay, this is where we're starting to get a little bit more complicated, but it is important. Every pal you capture has something called Work Suitability. This basically tells you what it is capable of doing around your base. Very early game, I highly recommend trying to just get a combination of pals that enables one of each of these work suitabilities. Now, that being said, there's some things that are less important than others early game. For example, medicine production, generating electricity. These don't really happen a ton early game, nor does cooling. But bare minimum, you want to get planting, watering, handiwork, gathering, lumbering, mining, transporting, and farming. These are all really, really important. Some pals have many more of these work suitability perks than other ones. Lamball is decent. Cadiva has a couple good ones. These are both like very, very early game and really easy to pick up. Some other good options. Tansy also covers a lot of different things here. But as you capture things, make sure you go into the menu and actually look these up to check out what their work suitability is, and try to grab everything on this list for your actual base. This is another quick and easy tip, but also very important. Throwing a ball at the Pokemon's front versus throwing a ball at the Pokemon's back actually has different capture rates. So you can see here I'm transitioning from a frontal throw to a back throw, and it increases the catch rate by almost 20%. This is really important, and finding ways you can flank whatever pal you're trying to capture during the battle is extremely helpful. Tip number 14, pals get stuck a lot. They'll get stuck all over the place. Sometimes they'll get stuck in walls, sometimes they'll get stuck in a base, sometimes they'll get stuck behind a structure. Other times they'll just fall off a cliff and not be able to get back. So rather than having to climb all the way down the cliff and pick your pal up and bring it back to your base, it's much easier to just go to your PalBox, go ahead and select them, pull them out, and then pull them back in. And you can see they just spawn again right out of the PalBox and go back to whatever they need to do. So very useful for trying to get things organized again. The 15th and final tip for this video. In your menu, there is something called a Paldeck. The Paldeck, very similar to a Pokedex, will show you information about the pals you've not only captured, but also seen. Now, this is really important because it showcases what their partner skill is, what their work suitability is, possible drops, which you're going to be referring to this constantly for specific materials that you need that you don't have. Now, the most important part of this is habitat. The habitat menu will actually show you where pals you've encountered before spawn on the map. So if you saw a pal and you're like, man, that's really cool, I wish I could catch more, or I saw it and didn't catch it, but I can't find it again, go to your Paldeck, select the pal, and it will show you exactly where they spawn. This is extremely helpful. So if you found these tips helpful and you like this video, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Only 0.1% of people that watch my videos are subscribed, so I really appreciate it. I also stream on Twitch every day, 12 p.m. PST. Swing by and feel free to ask any questions.